Well, I mean, pre-season training is always vital to us in the sense of getting the rhythm and the tempo and our fitness back into play. They've had quite a long pre-season this year in comparison with other seasons. Our last game was the 9th of May, and of course some players played in the World Cup and they won't be involved, obviously they need to get that 28-day rest. But they're ready, they need their football, and the training has been very good, they've worked really, really hard. They don't really get a lot of time off, this is hard work now. They've had their time off, and the concentration now is making sure we get to good form. And of course the game against Celtic on Friday night is a particularly difficult match to start with. No, it's I think we've got to we recognise the impact we have in terms of supporter base throughout the world, and of course you are right, we've got an incredible fan base in the Far East, whether it be China, Japan, Malaysia, Thailand, all these countries we've been to over the years. But we have been to the States twice, 6 years ago and 7 years ago, and it's very successful with full houses in all the games. And we know we've got a very strong fan base in the States. Pete Holland, who runs the Supporters Association from New York, has a fantastic collection of fans from all over, who when they all come over in a charter, and they all come from different places like Philadelphia, from Kansas, from Los Angeles and Boston, places like that, and they all meet into New York and then fly out to the games, So we have a very good fan base, and which is very important also that we also recognise in the United States at the moment, and Canada we're much the same. Young kids are taking it up very strongly. They're all playing soccer now. Everywhere you go, you see kids playing in the fields and practicing and developing their skills, and that's a healthy sign to see that. And I think that if we can play a part in being heroes to them, or be given a sort of insight into what a good footballer can do, a professional footballer can live out his life, and I think we're doing a good job. Well, it's improving. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Some good crowds now, and of course, I think people recognise that the difficulty of the MLS is, of course, it's such a big country, United States, so fans don't travel around. That's a great advantage of Europe and Great Britain. It's not such big countries that they can't move around. It's quite straightforward that way, and that's why we've such an emotional game in Europe, and particularly in Britain. But in the States, you can Boston to LA is maybe 5-6 hours in a flight, and the country is so big that it's very difficult to for fans to travel, which then takes away that sort of a real competitive edge you get in the British game. Obviously, we rely on the players from last year in terms of the experience they have, and some of them have been in the club quite a long time now, and some of them are still young, although they've been the first team for a long time, like Wes Brown and Darren Fletcher, John O'Shea. They've been at the club quite a long time now, and Wayne Rooney, for instance, has been at the club now 5-6 years. But the history of Manchester United is quite simple. That its whole history is based on young people, and that's where we're more comfortable. I think our fans are more comfortable with it too. So producing players is a big incentive for us in terms of we know the response we get from supporters. But when we produce a young player through the ranks, through our youth system, it's a fantastically satisfying thing also. So therefore, at the moment, we have a collection of young players who have been growing up in the club for the last few years, like Welbeck and Evans and Gibson. These young players are developing very well in the club. Makeda, one or two young players like are coming through, like young Gill and young Corey Evans, Johnny's brother. So we have a fine collection of young players who, if you don't give them an opportunity, they're going to stagnate and they're going to move to other clubs who will get the benefit of the work that we have done with them. And we've had experience of this in the past. So we try to avoid that as best we can and make sure we make the right decisions about these boys' careers, because most of them are very good, talented players. Well, I don't expect a hangover. I think there'll still be a bit of disappointment in the lad. I think all the players come back from the World Cup who didn't do well, who didn't reach their expectations, may I say, will feel that they've missed something, you know. And then that's because the World Cup's only once every 4 years. That's the horrible part of that tournament. And we have several players who come back very, very disappointed, with Patrice Evra, for instance, and Wayne Rooney, of course. Vida, Nemanja Vidic. I think the one who'd come back quite positive because he had a good World Cup was young Javier Hernandez from Mexico. I think he did very well, and I think he surprised a lot of people. So whereas we'll get some disappointments from players like Wayne and Nemanja and Patrice, I think we're going to have a positive effect from Javier.